Right now, in this very moment, you can feel it. That invisible weight pressing gently against the inside of your skull. The residue of 1,000 thoughts you didn't ask for. The echoes of screens, conversations, decisions, worries, all layered one on top of the other like dust settling on still water. You carry it without knowing. Every single day, your mind accumulates a fine, silent debris, and by nightfall, you are full of it. But here is what no one told you. Your brain already knows how to clean itself. Hidden deep within your skull is a secret plumbing system, a network so elegant that science only recently discovered it. It is called the glymphatic system, and it waits patiently for one signal. The moment you surrender to deep sleep, something remarkable begins. Your brain cells physically shrink, pulling away from each other, opening tiny channels between them. And into those channels rushes a warm, clear sea of cerebrospinal fluid, flooding every corridor of your mind, carrying away the metabolic waste of your waking life, the toxic proteins, the cellular exhaust, all of it, lifted and carried out like sediment from a riverbed. Imagine a quiet, ancient city at night. The cobblestone streets are narrow and winding. The inhabitants have closed their doors. The lanterns are dim. And now, under a pale, silver moon, a gentle river rises from beneath the stones, flowing silently through every alley, every courtyard, every forgotten corner, washing everything clean while the city sleeps, completely unaware. That is what happens inside you every night. So tonight, understand this. You are not merely falling asleep. You are initiating a sacred biological rinse. You are opening the gates of your deepest architecture and allowing the current to pass through, clearing every neural pathway, dissolving every shadow, making space for a new, bright, and silent tomorrow. So close your eyes now, settle into the dark, and feel it, that first wave of your own internal ocean, rising slowly from the base of your spine, climbing gently toward the center of your mind. Let it come. Let it wash over everything. The cleansing has already begun. You have spent the entire day thinking. From the moment your eyes opened this morning, your brain began its relentless work. Before your feet even touched the floor, billions of neurons were already firing, assembling your sense of self, orienting you in time and space, reminding you who you are, where you are, and what today demands of you. And from that first waking second, the machine never stopped. Every word you read, every face you recognized, every decision you made, no matter how small, every flicker of emotion, every sound you filtered, every step your body took without you consciously asking it to, all of it was managed by a 3-pound organ floating quietly inside your skull, drawing more energy per ounce than any other organ in your entire body. Your brain makes up roughly 2% of your body weight, and yet it consumes nearly 20% of all the energy your body produces. Think about that for a moment. 1/50th of your mass, burning through 1/5 of your fuel. Every second of every waking hour, glucose is being converted, oxygen is being consumed, and electrochemical signals are racing across synaptic gaps at speeds that would humble the most advanced supercomputer ever built. Your brain, right now, even as you listen to these words, is performing millions of simultaneous calculations, holding your attention, processing language, generating imagery, monitoring your heartbeat, your breath, the temperature of your skin. It does all of this without complaint, without rest, without asking for your permission or your gratitude. But there is a cost. There is always a cost. Every engine that burns fuel produces exhaust. Every factory that manufactures something leaves behind waste. And your brain is no different. As neurons fire throughout the day, they produce metabolic byproducts. Broken proteins, cellular debris, molecules that have served their purpose and now linger in the tight spaces between your brain cells like ash after a fire. One of the most significant of these waste products is a substance called beta amyloid, a sticky protein fragment that accumulates in the interstitial spaces of your brain with every passing hour of wakefulness. In small amounts, it is harmless, but when it builds up, when it is not regularly and thoroughly cleared away, it begins to clump. It begins to form plaques. And those plaques, over years and decades, are among the primary hallmarks of neurodegenerative disease. Your brain knows this. On some ancient cellular level, your brain understands that it cannot keep producing waste without a system to remove it. And so, buried deep within its architecture, there exists a mechanism for exactly this purpose, a cleaning system of extraordinary power and precision. But here is the revelation that changes everything. This system cannot run while you are awake. This is the great neural trade-off, the fundamental biological compromise that governs your existence more than almost any other. Your brain faces a choice every moment of every day between two essential but mutually exclusive operations. It can engage with the external world, processing the avalanche of sensory data that pours through your eyes, your ears, your skin, coordinating your movements, generating your thoughts, sustaining your consciousness. Or it can turn inward, redirect its resources, and begin the deep, meticulous work of cleaning itself at the cellular level. It cannot do both, not because it lacks intelligence or sophistication, but because the physics and biology simply do not allow it. These two operations compete for the same energy, the same space, the same cellular machinery. And so your brain must choose. During the day, it chooses the world. It chooses you. It chooses to keep you alive, alert, functional, and aware. And it pays for that choice with every passing hour as the waste quietly accumulates. Think of it this way. Imagine a grand museum, one of the most magnificent museums in the world, filled with priceless paintings, ancient sculptures, irreplaceable artifacts of human history. Every day, thousands of visitors stream through its halls. They come to look, to learn, to stand in awe before works of art that have survived centuries. The museum exists for this purpose. Its doors are open, its lights are on, its guards are posted, and the entire operation is oriented outward, toward the public, toward the experience of those who walk its floors. But here is what the visitors never see. After the last guest has left, after the doors have been locked and the lights dimmed, a different crew arrives. Restorers, conservators, specialists with delicate tools and trained hands. They move through the empty halls in near silence, examining each painting for microscopic damage, cleaning the surfaces of sculptures, adjusting the humidity, repairing what the simple passage of time and human presence has slowly worn away. This work is essential. Without it, The art would degrade, the colors would fade, the surfaces would crack. Within years, the museum would house only ruins. But this work cannot happen while the visitors are present. The chemicals used in restoration are sensitive. The processes require absolute stillness. The conservators need unobstructed access to every surface, every corner, every hidden space behind every frame. The museum must close before the restoration can begin. Your brain operates on exactly this principle. During the day, the museum is open. Your consciousness is the visitor, walking through the vast galleries of your mind, engaging with the exhibits of memory, perception, and thought. And the brain keeps every light on for you. It keeps every system running, every hallway accessible, every display illuminated. But the cost of this hospitality is that the cleaning crews cannot enter. The restoration teams wait in the wings, ready but idle, because the very act of keeping you conscious, of maintaining the elaborate performance of wakefulness, occupies the space and energy they need to do their work. Now think of it another way. Imagine a great highway, 6 lanes wide, cutting through the heart of a sprawling city. During the day, this highway is a river of motion. Cars, trucks, buses, thousands of vehicles moving in both directions, a ceaseless flow of traffic that keeps the city alive and connected. But the highway is aging. The asphalt is cracking. The lane markings are fading. The guardrails need reinforcement. The drainage system beneath the surface is beginning to clog. Engineers have assessed the damage. Repair crews are standing by with equipment and materials, but they cannot begin, not while the traffic is flowing. Not while the highway is performing its primary function of moving the city's lifeblood from one place to another, and so the crews wait for the only window available to them. 3 in the morning, the deep, silent hours when the traffic has finally thinned to almost nothing, when the great artery of the city is as close to empty as it will ever be. Only then do the orange cones appear. Only then do the crews move in, closing lanes, resurfacing the road, clearing the drains, restoring the infrastructure that everyone depends upon but no one ever sees being maintained. By dawn, the cones are gone. The crews have vanished. The highway is open again, smooth and renewed, and the first drivers of the morning will never know what happened in the dark hours while they slept. This is what your brain does every single night, or at least what it tries to do if you let it. And now, we arrive at one of the most counterintuitive truths in all of neuroscience: the energy paradox. You might assume that sleep is a passive state, that when you close your eyes and drift away, your brain simply powers down, going quiet and still like a computer entering standby mode. But this could not be further from the truth. Your brain during deep sleep is remarkably, almost shockingly, active. In some regions, its metabolic activity rivals or even exceeds what it produces during wakefulness. But the nature of that activity has fundamentally changed. The energy is no longer flowing outward toward the world, toward sensory processing and motor coordination and the construction of conscious experience. Instead, it has turned inward. The power that was lighting up the galleries for visitors is now powering the restoration crews. The energy that was sustaining 6 lanes of traffic is now driving the repair teams working beneath the surface. Your brain, in sleep, has not gone quiet. It has merely changed what it is doing with its extraordinary power, And what it is doing is saving itself. Because without this nightly inward shift, your brain would, in the most literal biological sense, begin to choke on the byproducts of its own success. Every brilliant thought you had today, every problem you solved, every emotion you processed, every memory you formed, all of it left behind a trace of waste. And that waste does not evaporate. It does not dissolve on its own. It sits in the narrow spaces between your neurons, accumulating, thickening, and if left unchecked, it begins to interfere with the very processes that created it. The synapses that fired so beautifully during the day begin to slow. The signals that raced with such precision begin to stutter. The mind that felt so sharp at noon feels foggy by midnight, not because it is tired in some vague, abstract sense, but because it is physically, chemically burdened by the residue of its own extraordinary output. Sleep is the solution that evolution designed, not as a luxury, not as a pause, but as a biological imperative so critical that every complex organism on Earth submits to it, despite the obvious vulnerability it creates. Every creature that sleeps is, for those hours, defenseless, blind to predators, unable to feed, unable to reproduce, unable to protect its young. The evolutionary cost of sleep is staggering, and yet not a single species has evolved its way out of it. Because the cost of not sleeping, of not allowing this internal shift to occur, is even greater. It is the slow, irreversible poisoning of the most important organ you possess. And so, as the day fades and your body begins to feel the pull of rest, something profound is set into motion. Your brain begins its transition. The pulse slows, the breath deepens. The muscles release their holding patterns, one by one, as the motor cortex gradually withdraws its commands. The thalamus, that great relay station at the center of your brain that has spent the entire day routing sensory information from your eyes, your ears, your skin to the cortex for processing, begins to close its gates. Not all at once, but in stages, like a series of locks on a canal, each one narrowing the flow of external information a little more, until the outside world is reduced to a distant murmur and then to nothing at all. This is the transition of power. The moment when the brain shifts its allegiance from the outer world to the inner one. The moment when consciousness is gently, firmly set aside, not destroyed, not erased, but placed in a kind of sacred suspension so that the deeper, older, more essential systems can finally have their turn. And in the darkness of this new interior silence, something begins to move. You cannot feel it. You will never be aware of it. But it is happening now, as it has happened every night of your life since before you were born. The architecture of your brain is quietly rearranging itself. Spaces are opening that were closed during the day. Channels that were compressed by the sheer density of waking neural activity are beginning to expand. And into those newly opened channels, a fluid is beginning to flow. Slowly at first, like the first thin trickle of water finding its way through a dry riverbed after the season's first rain, but building, gathering force, preparing to become something much larger, much more powerful. A current that will move through every region of your sleeping brain with a purpose as ancient as life itself. The night shift has begun. The lights are dimming. The visitors have gone. And deep within the museum of your mind, the doors to the hidden rooms are opening, one by one, as the restoration crews step silently inside. There is an ocean inside your head. You have never seen it. You have never felt it. And yet, at this very moment, your brain is floating in it, suspended, cradled, held aloft by a warm, crystal-clear liquid that surrounds every fold, fills every crevice, and cushions every delicate structure within your skull. This liquid has been with you since before you were born. It was there when your brain was nothing more than a tiny bud of neural tissue in the womb, and it has been there every second of every day since, circulating in silence, renewing itself quietly, performing its ancient work without ever once demanding your attention or your awareness. It is called cerebrospinal fluid, and for most of the history of medicine, it was profoundly misunderstood. For centuries, scientists regarded this fluid as little more than biological packaging material, a shock absorber, a passive cushion whose only purpose was to protect the brain from bumping against the hard interior walls of the skull. And it does serve this purpose beautifully. If you were to stumble and strike your head, it is this fluid that absorbs the impact, distributing the force across its volume like water catching a falling stone, preventing the soft tissue of your brain from slamming into bone. But to see cerebrospinal fluid as merely a cushion is like looking at the ocean and seeing only a large puddle. It is to miss everything that matters, everything that moves, everything that lives within the current, because this fluid is not still. It is not sitting quietly inside your skull like water in a bowl. It is moving, constantly, rhythmically, with a pulse and a pattern that mirrors the deepest rhythms of your body. It flows, it circulates, it rises and falls with a tide as real and as predictable as any ocean tide, governed by the moon. And the forces that drive this tide are the very forces that keep you alive: your heartbeat, your breath, the steady, ancient drumbeat at the center of your existence. With every contraction of your heart, a pressure wave travels upward through the arteries of your neck and into the vascular network of your brain. This wave is subtle. You cannot feel it, but it is powerful enough to nudge the cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds those arteries, pushing it gently forward, propelling it along channels that run parallel to the blood vessels themselves. These channels are called paravascular spaces, and they are among the most extraordinary and recently discovered features of your brain's anatomy. They are narrow corridors, microscopic tunnels that wrap around the outside of every artery and every vein that penetrates your brain tissue. And they serve as the highways, the aqueducts, through which this cleansing fluid travels into the deepest interior of your mind. Picture, if you can, a crystal-clear mountain stream, not a raging torrent, but a gentle, steady current, winding its way through a narrow canyon of ancient stone. The walls of the canyon rise high on either side, dark and close, and the stream moves between them with a patience that speaks of centuries. It finds every gap, it follows every curve, it reaches into every hollow and every crevice that the stone has carved over millennia, carrying with it the power to smooth, to polish, to wash clean everything it touches. This is what the cerebrospinal fluid does inside your brain. It enters through the paravascular spaces that surround your arteries, driven forward by the gentle, rhythmic push of your pulse, and it winds its way deeper and deeper into the neural landscape, reaching folds and recesses that no other system in your body can access. And the force that propels it is not random, it is not chaotic. It is governed by what scientists call convective flow, a process driven by pressure gradients, by the difference in pressure between one region and another. When your heart beats, it creates a momentary increase in pressure at the arterial end of the system. That pressure pushes the cerebrospinal fluid inward through the paravascular tunnels into the tissue itself. And as the fluid moves deeper, it encounters regions of lower pressure near the venous side of the circulation, where the veins carry blood back out of the brain. This pressure difference, this gentle but persistent gradient, pulls the fluid through like a current through a riverbed, ensuring that it does not merely seep in and sit, but that it moves, that it flows, that it passes through the tissue and carries with it everything it has collected along the way. And your breathing amplifies this process in ways that are only now being fully understood. Every breath you take, every slow, deep inhalation creates its own set of pressure changes within your chest and your skull. When you inhale, the pressure inside your thorax drops, and this drop creates a gentle suction effect that influences the dynamics of the cerebrospinal fluid. When you exhale, the pressure shifts again, and so your breath, layered on top of your heartbeat, creates a complex, overlapping rhythm of fluid movement, a tide within a tide, a wave riding upon a wave. The result is a pulsing, flowing, living current that moves through your brain not in a single direction but in a rhythmic oscillation, forward and back, in and out, like the breathing of the ocean itself against a quiet shore. Imagine standing at the edge of a calm sea at night. The moon is high and silver, and its light traces a shimmering path across the water. The tide is coming in, but gently, so gently that each wave barely whispers as it reaches the sand. It arrives, spreads thin and wide across the shore, pauses for a single breath, and then withdraws, pulling back into the darkness, only to return a moment later, reaching a little further this time, touching stones and shells that the last wave missed. There is no urgency in this rhythm. There is no force. There is only the patient, ceaseless repetition of arrival and departure, of cleansing and renewal, of water meeting land and carrying away whatever the land no longer needs. This is the rhythm that is happening inside your skull at this very moment. This is the music that your brain has been listening to since the day it was formed. Now consider this. Your brain produces roughly 500 milliliters of cerebrospinal fluid every single day. That is about 2 cups, enough to fill a small bottle. But the total volume of fluid surrounding your brain and spinal cord at any given moment is only about 150 milliliters. This means that the entire reservoir of cerebrospinal fluid is being replaced, refreshed, turned over completely, 3 to 4 times every 24 hours. The ocean inside your head is not ancient water sitting stagnant in a sealed chamber. It is a living, flowing, constantly renewing body of liquid that remakes itself again and again and again throughout the day and night. Every few hours, the fluid you are floating in is not the same fluid that was there before. It has been drained away through dedicated channels and replaced with a fresh supply, newly produced by specialized structures deep within your brain called the choroid plexuses, delicate, velvety folds of tissue that filter your blood and produce this precious liquid drop by careful drop. You are, in the most literal sense, being bathed from within. Your brain is immersed in a private, internal sea that is perpetually refreshing itself, perpetually cycling, perpetually renewing the medium in which your thoughts and memories and dreams are suspended. And you have never once been aware of it. Not a single sensation has ever reached your consciousness to alert you to this extraordinary fact. The ocean inside you is invisible, silent, and continuous, and it has been washing over the landscape of your mind since before you drew your first breath of outside air. But here is where the story deepens. Here is where this invisible ocean reveals its true purpose. During the day, this fluid circulates. Yes, it cushions and protects and renews itself as it always does. But its ability to penetrate deep into the brain tissue, to flow through the narrow interstitial spaces between individual neurons, to reach the hidden places where metabolic waste has been accumulating all day, is severely limited. The pathways are compressed. The channels are tight. The tissue itself is dense with activity, swollen with the energy and effort of conscious life, and the fluid can only skim the surface, flowing around the exterior, but struggling to reach the interior, where the waste is deepest and the need is greatest. It is as though the mountain stream has encountered a section of canyon where the walls have pressed together, narrowing the passage to a fraction of its normal width. The water still flows, but it cannot reach the hidden pools and side channels where sediment has settled. It moves past them, unable to enter, unable to clean what lies within. And so the sediment remains. The waste accumulates. And with every passing hour of wakefulness, the gap between what needs to be cleaned and what can be cleaned grows wider. This is why sleep changes everything. This is why the transition you felt at the end of the last chapter, that dimming of the lights, that closing of the gates, that sacred shift from outer engagement to inner restoration, matters more than almost anything else your body does. Because when sleep arrives, when true, deep sleep takes hold, the dynamics of this entire system transform. The fluid that was circulating gently around the exterior of your brain is suddenly able to penetrate inward with a force and a depth that is impossible during waking hours. The tide that was lapping softly at the shore now surges inland, reaching places it could not touch before, flowing into channels that were closed, filling spaces that were compressed, carrying its cleansing current into the deepest, most hidden recesses of your neural architecture. And the reason this becomes possible, the mechanism that unlocks this extraordinary surge of cleansing flow, is one of the most astonishing discoveries in modern neuroscience. It is not a chemical signal. It is not a hormonal switch. It is something far more physical, far more immediate, far more breathtaking in its simplicity. The tissue itself changes shape. As you descend into deep sleep, as the last traces of waking consciousness dissolve and the brain commits fully to its restorative mode, something begins to happen at the cellular level that would be visible under a microscope if you could watch it in real time. The cells of your brain, the neurons and the glial cells that make up the dense, intricate fabric of your mind, begin to do something extraordinary, something that redefines what you thought you knew about the solidity and permanence of the organ inside your skull. They begin to pull away from each other, slowly, quietly, like a crowd in a grand hall that has been standing shoulder to shoulder all day, pressed together by the sheer density of their numbers. And now, one by one, each person takes a single step back. The spaces between them widen. The air begins to circulate, And where before there was a solid, impenetrable mass of bodies, now there are gaps, channels, openings that were not there before. Pathways that suddenly, for the first time since morning, allow something to pass through. And into those newly opened spaces, the river begins to pour. The clear, quiet, ever-renewing tide of cerebrospinal fluid, which has been waiting at the margins of your brain all day, patient and ready, now finds its way inward. It flows through channels that have just appeared, rushes into corridors that the retreating cells have just revealed, reaches neurons that have not been washed since the last time you slept, and it begins to carry away everything that does not belong. The broken proteins, the metabolic fragments, the accumulated debris of a full day of extraordinary mental effort. The architecture of your brain is shifting. The very cells that make up your mind are rearranging themselves, creating space where there was none, opening doors that were sealed, inviting the river to enter and do what it was always meant to do. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry dressed as science. This is a physical, measurable, observable transformation that happens inside your skull every time you surrender to deep sleep. The landscape of your mind is literally reshaping itself to welcome the flood. And the flood is coming now, rising through channels that are widening with every breath, with every slow, deep beat of your resting heart, preparing to wash through every hidden corner of this extraordinary organ that has carried you so faithfully through another day. What you are about to hear may be one of the most extraordinary facts ever discovered about the human brain. It is a fact so strange, so counterintuitive, so quietly miraculous that when it was first published in the scientific literature, it challenged everything neuroscientists thought they understood about the physical nature of the organ inside your skull. It is this: when you fall into deep sleep, your brain cells shrink. They physically, measurably, visibly contract. The neurons that have been firing all day, the glial cells that have been supporting them, the dense, tightly packed fabric of your living mind, all of it pulls inward, draws itself smaller, reduces its own volume by as much as 60%. 60%. More than half of the cellular bulk that filled your brain during the day, quietly, voluntarily, withdraws into itself when sleep takes hold. Let that settle for a moment. The very cells that make you who you are, that hold your memories, your personality, your capacity for language and love and abstract thought, these cells choose every single night to become smaller, to take up less space, to pull back from their neighbors and create openings where before there was only density. This is not damage. This is not decay. This is not something going wrong. This is design. This is a mechanism so ancient, so fundamental, so perfectly engineered that it has been operating flawlessly inside the skulls of sleeping creatures for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans existed, long before mammals walked the earth, long before any organism with a complex nervous system opened its eyes for the first time and looked out at the world. And the purpose of this shrinkage is not what you might expect. The cells do not contract because they are tired. They do not shrink because they have been depleted or worn down by the day's demands. They shrink to create space. They pull themselves inward for the same reason that a crowd parts in the middle of a narrow street to let something through. And what needs to pass through, what has been waiting at the edges all day for exactly this moment, is the river, the clear, warm, ever-renewing current of cerebrospinal fluid that you heard about as it circled the exterior of your brain, pulsing with the rhythm of your heart and your breath, pressing gently against the boundaries of your neural tissue, searching for a way in. During the day, it could not enter. The cells were too large. The tissue was too dense. The interstitial spaces, those microscopic gaps between one cell and the next, were compressed to their minimum width by the sheer volume of active, swollen, energy-consuming neural matter. The river could only flow around the outside, touching the surface but unable to reach the interior where the waste had been accumulating for hours. But now, in the sanctuary of deep sleep, the cells have heard the signal, and they have responded with an act of such profound biological generosity that it borders on the sacred. They have made themselves small so that the space between them can become large. Imagine a city, a vast, ancient city with buildings pressed so closely together that the streets between them are barely wide enough for a single person to pass. During the day, these narrow lanes are choked with life: merchants, travelers, carts, animals, the constant bustling traffic of a civilization in motion. There is no room to spare. Every inch of space is claimed. Every alley is occupied. Every courtyard is full. And beneath the cobblestones, hidden from view, there is a network of channels designed to carry fresh water from the mountain springs to every corner of the city. But the channels are dry. The buildings above them have settled and pressed down over the years, compressing the underground passages, leaving them too narrow for the water to flow. The city is slowly accumulating dust and waste, and the very infrastructure built to clean it has been crushed by the weight of the life above. And then, one night, something miraculous happens. The buildings begin to move, slowly, silently, without any visible force. Every structure in the city draws itself inward, pulling its walls back from the street, shrinking its footprint by more than half. The narrow alleys become wide boulevards, the cramped courtyards become open plazas, and beneath the ground, the channels expand. Their walls no longer press together, their passages suddenly wide and clear, and from the springs in the mountains, the water begins to flow. First a trickle, then a stream, then a rushing, purifying torrent that fills every channel, rises through every grate, washes over every stone surface in the city, carrying away the accumulated grime of the day. This is what happens inside your brain every time you enter deep sleep. This is the miracle of expansion through contraction. The interstitial space of your brain, the collective volume of all those tiny gaps between cells, increases by approximately 60% during sleep. This is not a subtle change. This is not a minor fluctuation. This is a dramatic, wholesale transformation of the physical geometry of your brain. During the day, the interstitial space accounts for roughly 14% of your total brain volume. During deep sleep, it expands to nearly 23%. Nearly a quarter of your brain's volume becomes open channel, open river, open highway for the cerebrospinal fluid to rush through, and the result is staggering. The rate at which this cleansing fluid can flow through your brain tissue increases tenfold, 10 times faster than during wakefulness. 10 times more volume, 10 times more reach, 10 times more carrying capacity to lift and transport the metabolic waste that has been building up all day in those once compressed spaces. Think of a sponge, a common kitchen sponge, dense and heavy with old water. If you try to push fresh water through it while it is fully expanded, fully saturated, the water moves slowly, reluctantly, struggling to find a path through the crowded matrix of fibers. But now, squeeze that sponge, compress it in your fist, wringing out the old water, and then release it into a basin of fresh, clean water. Watch how the sponge drinks. Watch how the fresh water rushes into every pore, every channel, every microscopic space that the compression has just opened up. The water flows freely now, moving through the sponge with an ease and a speed that was impossible moments before. The act of squeezing, of contracting, of making the structure temporarily smaller is precisely what allowed the renewal to happen. This is the principle that governs your sleeping brain. The cells squeeze themselves small, and in doing so, they open the floodgates. But how does the fluid actually cross the boundary between the paravascular channels and the interstitial space? How does it leave the highways that surround the arteries and enter the tissue itself? This is where one of the most elegant molecular mechanisms in all of biology reveals itself. Embedded in the membranes of the astrocytes, the star-shaped glial cells that form the outer wall of the paravascular channels are tiny protein structures called aquaporin, 4 channels. These are molecular doorways, each one a precisely engineered pore that allows water molecules to pass through the cell membrane at extraordinary speed. A single aquaporin, 4-channel, can transport billions of water molecules per second. And the astrocytes that line the paravascular spaces are densely studded with these channels, their surfaces bristling with molecular gateways that face outward toward the interstitial space, like 1,000 open windows facing a courtyard. When the brain cells shrink during sleep and the interstitial space expands, these aquaporin, 4 channels become the critical interface between the flowing river of cerebrospinal fluid and the newly opened landscape of the brain tissue. The fluid arrives through the paravascular highways, propelled by the slow pulse of the heart and the rhythm of the breath, and when it reaches the astrocyte boundary, it passes through the aquaporin, 4 channels like water pouring through a sieve, entering the interstitial space in vast quantities, flooding the gaps between neurons, reaching cells that have not been washed since the previous night. Without these channels, the system would fail. The fluid would reach the border of the tissue and stop, unable to cross. The river would pool at the edge of the canyon and never enter the valley. But the aquaporin, 4 channels ensure that the crossing happens efficiently, rapidly, and in the precise locations where it is needed most. And here is what makes this entire process so deeply humbling, so quietly awe-inspiring. The brain does not fight this transformation. It does not resist the shrinkage. It does not cling to its daytime architecture, to the fullness and density that it maintained so fiercely while you were awake. Instead, it surrenders. It lets go. It releases the very structure that defined it during the day and allows itself to become something temporarily smaller, temporarily simpler, temporarily more open and more vulnerable, because it understands, on some level far deeper than consciousness, that this surrender is the price of renewal, that you cannot be cleaned while you are clenched, that you cannot be restored while you are rigid, that the brilliant, complex, magnificent structure of the waking brain must dissolve, must soften, must yield, before it can be made brilliant and complex and magnificent again. This is the biological surrender, and it is perhaps the most profound lesson your body has to teach you. That strength is not found in holding on. That renewal does not come from maintaining your grip. That the most powerful thing your brain can do after a long day of extraordinary effort is to let go of the very shape it held so tightly, to trust the process that requires it to become less in order to become more. Every night, without your knowledge, without your permission, without your conscious participation, the most complex object in the known universe practices the art of humility. It makes itself small, it creates space, it opens its doors, and it allows the river to do what the river was always meant to do. Think of what this means for you. Lying here in the dark, feeling the weight of the day beginning to lift. The geometry of your mind is changing. Right now, in this very moment, if you are allowing yourself to drift toward deep sleep, the cells of your brain are beginning their quiet contraction. Billions of neurons, trillions of glial cells, each one drawing its boundaries inward, each one creating a tiny additional fraction of space around itself, and the sum of all those tiny fractions is an ocean of openness, a network of channels that was not there an hour ago, a landscape transformed from a dense, impenetrable forest into an open meadow through which a great, clear river can finally flow. You can almost feel it if you let yourself. That sensation of loosening, that subtle, interior feeling of expansion that comes not from growing larger, but from releasing what was held too tightly. It is the same feeling you get when you finally unclench your jaw after hours of unconscious tension, when you drop your shoulders away from your ears, when you let your hands fall open after holding them in fists you did not know you were making. The brain is doing this now, at a cellular level, in every region, in every fold, in every hidden recess. It is unclenching, it is opening, it is creating the conditions for something extraordinary to happen next, because the space is ready now. The boulevards are wide, the channels are clear, the aquaporin, 4 gates are open, and the river is surging inward with a force and a freedom that the cramped, busy, daytime brain could never have permitted. And this river is not empty. It is not flowing for the sake of flowing. It carries with it a purpose, a mission, a biological mandate as old as sleep itself. It has come to find what does not belong, to locate the toxic fragments, the broken proteins, the accumulated metabolic shadows of your waking hours, all of it still sitting in the spaces where it was deposited throughout the day, waiting in the dark for exactly this moment, the moment when the river arrives, the moment when the current reaches the places where the waste has gathered, the moment when the great, silent, cellular cleaning of your mind finally, truly begins. The space has been made. The river is flowing. And now, in the deepest chambers of your sleeping brain, the flushing has started. The shadows of the day are about to be lifted, carried, and washed away into the night. Now the river is inside. The cerebrospinal fluid has crossed the threshold. It has passed through the aquaporin. 4 channels flooded the newly expanded interstitial spaces, and it is moving now, steadily, purposefully, through the deepest corridors of your sleeping brain. But this river has not come merely to flow. It has not entered this sacred interior space just to circulate and return. It has come with a mission. It has come to find something, to locate, to detach, to lift, and to carry away the invisible residue that your brilliant, tireless, extraordinary brain has been producing all day long. It has come for the toxins, and now you must understand what these toxins are, because they are not abstract, they are not metaphorical, They are not some vague notion of mental fatigue dressed up in scientific language. They are real, physical, measurable molecules. They have names, they have structures, they have specific, well-documented effects on the neurons they accumulate around. And if you have ever felt the heaviness of a mind that has been awake too long, if you have ever experienced that thick, sluggish, grey sensation of a brain that cannot think clearly, cannot focus, cannot find the words it needs or the sharpness it once had, then you have already felt what these molecules do when they are allowed to build up unchecked. The first and most notorious of these waste products is beta amyloid. It is a protein fragment, a small, sticky piece of a larger protein that is naturally produced by neurons as a byproduct of their normal activity. Every time a neuron fires, every time a synaptic signal crosses the gap between one cell and another, trace amounts of beta amyloid are generated and released into the surrounding fluid. During any single moment, the quantity is negligible, insignificant. A few molecules here, a few molecules there, drifting into the interstitial space like dust motes, falling through still air. But neurons do not fire once. They fire constantly, billions of them, millions of times per second, all day, every day, for the entire duration of your waking life. And each firing adds its tiny contribution to the growing pool of beta amyloid accumulating in the spaces between your cells. By the end of a single day of normal mental activity, the concentration of beta amyloid in your brain has increased significantly compared to when you woke up that morning. It is there, right now, clinging to the surfaces of your neurons, drifting in the narrow channels between your cells, beginning to find other beta amyloid molecules and stick to them, forming small clusters that grow larger with every passing hour. The second waste product is tau. If beta amyloid is the dust that settles on the outside of your neural architecture, tau is the rust that forms within. Tau is a protein that normally exists inside neurons, where it plays a vital structural role, stabilizing the internal scaffolding that gives each neuron its shape and allows it to transport essential materials from one end of the cell to the other. But when neurons are stressed, when they have been firing intensely for extended periods, when the metabolic demands of the day have pushed them to their limits, tau proteins can become misshapen. They twist, they fold incorrectly, and in their misfolded state, they detach from the internal scaffolding they were meant to support and begin to aggregate, tangling together into dense, fibrous clumps that interfere with the neuron's ability to function. These tau tangles, like beta amyloid plaques, are among the defining hallmarks of neurodegenerative disease when they are allowed to accumulate over years and decades. But in the short term, in the span of a single day, even modest increases in misfolded tau contribute to the subtle but unmistakable sensation of a brain that is no longer operating at its best. And these are only the most studied of the waste products. Your brain also accumulates adenosine, a molecule that builds up with every hour of wakefulness and actively suppresses neural firing, making you feel progressively more tired as the day wears on. It accumulates oxidative byproducts, the molecular damage caused by the sheer intensity of the brain's energy metabolism. It accumulates fragments of spent neurotransmitters, broken receptor proteins, excess ions, and a host of other cellular debris that the frantic pace of waking life generates faster than the brain can clear during daylight hours. This is the toxic fog, and it is far more literal than you have ever been told. That feeling you know so well, the one that descends in the late afternoon or the early evening, when your thoughts seem to move through thick air, when your patience thins for no clear reason, when your creativity dims and your temper shortens and the world feels heavier and more irritating than it did at breakfast. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is not you failing to manage your stress or your emotions. This is chemistry. This is physics. This is the measurable, documentable, visible accumulation of protein waste pressing against the delicate machinery of your neurons, interfering with the signals they are trying to send, clogging the channels through which your thoughts are trying to flow. You are not tired in some abstract psychological sense. You are congested. Your brain is carrying a physical burden that it has been accumulating since the moment you opened your eyes, and by evening, that burden has become heavy enough to alter the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you experience the world around you. And now the river has come to take it all away. Picture a painting, a magnificent, centuries-old masterpiece hanging in a dim, forgotten corner of a great gallery. Over the years, layers of grime have settled on its surface, smoke from candles, dust from the air, a thin yellowing coat of old varnish that was applied generations ago to protect it, but has long since darkened and cracked. The colors beneath are still there, vivid and luminous, exactly as the artist intended them. But you cannot see them. The surface is clouded, the details are lost. The painting looks muted, dull, as though the life has drained from it. And then a restorer arrives, patient, careful, exquisitely skilled. With the softest of solvents and the gentlest of touches, they begin to work, layer by layer, stroke by careful stroke. The grime is lifted, the old varnish dissolves, and beneath it, color by astonishing color, the original painting begins to emerge. Blues that glow like deep water, golds that catch the light like living flame, details that no one has seen in 100 years, suddenly sharp and clear and breathtaking. The painting has not been changed. Nothing has been added to it. It has only been cleaned, and in the cleaning, everything that was always there has been revealed. This is what the glymphatic system does to your neurons while you sleep. It is the restorer. The cerebrospinal fluid is its solvent, and the layers of beta amyloid, the tangles of misfolded tau, the accumulated metabolic grime of the day. These are the varnish that has been dimming your brilliance since morning. The process is mechanical in the most elegant sense. The fluid moves through the expanded interstitial spaces with a force that scientists have likened to a gentle but persistent pressure wash. It does not simply drift past the waist and hope to pick it up. It actively dislodges it. The convective flow, driven by the pressure gradients of your sleeping heartbeat and your slow, deep breathing, creates currents strong enough to detach beta amyloid molecules from the surfaces where they have been clinging. It disrupts the weak molecular bonds that hold early-stage protein clusters together, breaking them apart before they can grow into the larger, more dangerous aggregations that resist clearance. It moves through the spaces around each neuron with enough volume and enough velocity to physically sweep the dissolved and detached waste along with it, carrying it away from the cells that produced it, through the interstitial channels, toward the drainage pathways that will remove it from the brain entirely. And where does it go? The waste-laden fluid, now carrying its cargo of dissolved proteins and cellular debris, flows toward the paravascular spaces that surround the veins. Just as the clean fluid entered through the channels around the arteries, the dirty fluid exits through the channels around the veins, completing a circuit, a loop, a full cycle of entry, passage, collection, and departure. From the venous paravascular spaces, the fluid and its cargo drain into the meningeal lymphatic vessels, thin, delicate tubes that run along the membranes covering the brain and that were themselves only discovered in the last decade, overturning the long-held belief that the brain had no lymphatic drainage system at all. These vessels carry the waste out of the skull and into the body's general lymphatic circulation, where it is processed and broken down by the liver and the kidneys, metabolized, neutralized, and ultimately eliminated from the body entirely. The beta amyloid that was clinging to your neurons an hour ago will, by morning, have been dismantled and excreted. The misfolded tau that was tangling inside stressed cells will have been carried away and destroyed. The fog will have lifted, not because you willed it away, not because you meditated or thought positive thoughts or forced yourself to relax, but because your body, in its ancient wisdom, performed this act of purification for you, while you were not even conscious to witness it. Think of a gardener in late autumn, moving through a once vibrant garden that has been overtaken by the season's end. Dead leaves cover every path. Withered stems lean against fences. The beds are cluttered with the remains of plants that bloomed magnificently in summer, but have now completed their cycle. The garden is not ruined. The soil beneath is still rich. The roots are still alive, waiting in the dark earth for the signal to grow again. But before spring can come, the debris must be cleared. And so the gardener works, quietly and without hurry, gathering the fallen leaves, pulling the spent stalks, raking the paths clean, composting what can be composted, removing what must be removed. When the work is done, the garden looks bare, empty even. But it is not empty. It is ready. It has been prepared. The space has been made for new growth, and when the warmth returns, the green will rise faster and stronger than before, because it will not have to fight through the weight of last season's remains. Your brain, right now, is being gardened. The dead leaves of the day are being gathered. The spent and broken proteins are being composted and carried away. And with every molecule of waste that is lifted from the surface of your neurons, those neurons become a little freer, a little lighter, a little more capable of doing what they were designed to do. The synaptic gaps that were clogged with debris are clearing, and the signals that will cross them tomorrow will travel faster, arrive cleaner, carry more information with less interference. The receptors that were coated with protein fragments are being uncovered, and their sensitivity is being restored to the levels your brain needs to operate at its sharpest. The biological reset is underway, not as a metaphor, not as a wish, as a physical, chemical, measurable transformation happening inside your skull at this very moment. And this is perhaps the most beautiful truth of all. This flushing, this purification, this meticulous and thorough cleaning of the most precious organ you possess, it happens without any effort on your part. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to understand it. You do not have to direct it or manage it or even believe in it. You simply have to sleep. You simply have to surrender, to let go, to close your eyes, and allow your body to perform this extraordinary act of care on your behalf. It is, in the most literal and the most poetic sense, an act of self-love performed by your biology while your consciousness rests. Your body loves you enough to clean your mind while you dream. But there is a condition. There is a requirement that cannot be negotiated or shortcut or bypassed. This process, this magnificent flushing of the neural landscape, does not reach its full power during light or fragmented sleep. The cell shrinkage is incomplete when sleep is shallow. The interstitial expansion is limited when you are drifting in and out of wakefulness. The pressure gradients that drive the convective flow are weaker, less organized, less capable of reaching the deepest accumulations of waste. The river flows, yes, but it flows like a stream in drought, too thin and too slow to carry the heaviest debris. For the full rinse to occur, for the beta amyloid and the tau and the full spectrum of metabolic waste to be thoroughly, completely flushed from every fold and fissure of your brain, you must descend. You must go deeper than ordinary rest, deeper than the drowsy half-sleep of a restless night. You must reach the profound, slow, ancient rhythm that lies at the very bottom of your sleep architecture, the rhythm where your brain waves stretch long and wide like the swells of a deep ocean, where your body is at its stillest and your mind is at its most open. You must reach the place where the cleaning crews have unlimited access, unlimited time, and unlimited power to do their most thorough and most essential work. The place where the pressure of the flow is strongest, the channels are widest, and the river becomes not a stream but a flood. That place is waiting for you now. It is calling you downward, deeper, into the quietest and most powerful layer of sleep your brain is capable of producing. And as you feel yourself beginning to descend toward it, know that every fraction of depth you gain is a fraction more of your mind being cleaned, polished, and prepared for the extraordinary clarity of the morning that is coming. You are descending now. You can feel it, even if you cannot name it. A heaviness that is not exhaustion, a depth that is not darkness, a slowing, a thickening, a settling of everything you are into something older and deeper and more still than anything your waking mind has ever known. The surface of consciousness is far above you now, a distant shimmer like sunlight seen from the bottom of a deep, warm lake. The thoughts that chased each other through your mind an hour ago have dissolved. The worries that circled like restless birds have landed and folded their wings. Even your sense of self, that constant narration that tells you who you are and what you need and where you are going, has grown quiet. Not gone, not erased, but set down gently, like a book placed on a bedside table, its pages still open, but no longer being read. You are entering delta sleep, the deepest layer of human consciousness, the basement of the mind. And what happens here, in this profound and hidden place, is the most powerful act of biological restoration your body is capable of performing. Your brain waves have changed. Throughout the evening, as you moved from wakefulness into lighter stages of sleep, the electrical patterns produced by your cortex gradually shifted. The fast, irregular beta waves of alert, active thinking gave way to the slower alpha waves of relaxation. Those yielded to the even slower theta waves of early sleep, the dreamlike, drifting state where thoughts lose their logic and images float without narrative. But now, something deeper has taken hold. Your cortex has begun to produce waves of a different character entirely. These are delta waves, massive, slow, rolling oscillations of electrical activity that sweep across the surface of your brain like great, low swells crossing a vast and windless ocean. Their frequency is between half a cycle and 4 cycles per second. Half a cycle per second. In the time it takes your waking brain to fire dozens of rapid chattering signals, your sleeping brain now produces a single, enormous, unhurried wave that travels from the front of your cortex to the back, encompassing billions of neurons in a synchronized pulse of activity that is as powerful as it is slow. And these waves are not merely electrical. They are not simply patterns on a monitor in a sleep laboratory, abstract squiggles to be measured and catalogued. They are physical. They are mechanical. Each delta wave represents a coordinated event in which vast populations of neurons fire together and then fall silent together, creating a rhythmic alternation between activity and rest, between depolarization and hyperpolarization, between a state where the cells are electrically charged and a state where they are electrically quiet. And this alternation, this rhythmic pulsing of on and off, of firing and silence, does something extraordinary to the fluid dynamics inside your skull. It acts as a pump. Imagine a massive engine, not the screaming high-revolution engine of a race car or a jet turbine, but something far older and far more powerful. A great subterranean engine built into the bedrock of the earth, turning so slowly that each rotation takes 2 full seconds. You cannot hear it with your ears. The frequency is too low, below the threshold of human hearing, but you can feel it, a deep, resonant vibration that moves through the stone, through the soil, through the foundations of everything built above it. Each rotation sends a pulse of pressure outward, a wave that travels through the underground channels and aquifers, pushing water through passages that would otherwise be still, driving the current deeper and further than gravity alone could ever achieve. This engine does not rush. It does not strain. It operates with the patience of geology, with the certainty of tides, with the knowledge that power at this scale does not require speed. It requires only persistence and depth. This is your delta rhythm. This is the engine that drives the deepest and most thorough phase of your brain's nightly cleaning. Each slow wave, each massive oscillation of synchronized neural activity creates a pressure pulse within the interstitial fluid of your brain. When billions of neurons fire together during the active phase of the wave, the tissue swells slightly, compressing the interstitial space and pushing the cerebrospinal fluid forward through the channels. When those same billions of neurons fall silent during the quiet phase, the tissue relaxes, the space expands, and fresh fluid is drawn in to replace what was just pushed through. Fire and rest. Compress and expand. Push and pull. Over and over, at the rate of 1 or 2 cycles per second, hour after hour, through the deepest watches of the night. This is the pulsatile flow, and its power during delta sleep is unlike anything that occurs at any other stage of consciousness. Scientists measuring the movement of cerebrospinal fluid through the brains of sleeping subjects have found that during slow-wave sleep, the volume and velocity of glymphatic flow increases by approximately 90% compared to the waking state. 90%. The cleaning system that was already working during lighter stages of sleep, already benefiting from the cell shrinkage, already carrying away waste through the expanded interstitial channels, now reaches a level of efficiency that dwarfs everything that came before. The river that was flowing becomes a flood, the current that was steady becomes a surge, and the waste that resisted lighter currents, the heavier aggregations of beta amyloid, the more stubbornly adhered deposits of misfolded tau, the debris that clung to neural surfaces through the gentler phases of sleep is now confronted with a force sufficient to dislodge it, dissolve it, and sweep it away. Every slow wave is a heartbeat of the cleaning system. Every delta oscillation is a pulse of the pump, and with each pulse, a fresh volume of clear, warm, cerebrospinal fluid is driven deeper into the folds of your brain, reaching neurons that lighter sleep could not fully access, flushing channels that lighter currents could not fully clear. The rhythm is ancient. It is present in every mammalian brain that has ever been studied. It predates language. It predates culture. It predates every civilization that has ever risen and fallen on the surface of this planet. Your brain has been beating this slow, deep drum since the first night your ancestors closed their eyes on the African savanna and surrendered to the dark. But the delta rhythm alone does not explain why this stage is so extraordinarily effective. There is a chemical dimension to this story that is equally essential, and it involves a molecule you have been swimming in all day without knowing its name: norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. This is the brain's alertness chemical, the neurotransmitter most responsible for keeping you awake, focused, and responsive to the external world. During the day, norepinephrine levels in your brain are relatively high, and this serves a critical survival function. It keeps your senses sharp. It maintains your muscle tone. It ensures that your brain is ready to react to any threat, any opportunity, any sudden change in your environment. But norepinephrine has a side effect that is directly relevant to the cleaning process. It keeps your brain cells swollen. When norepinephrine is present in the interstitial fluid, the cells of your brain maintain their full, expanded daytime volume. They hold their shape. They press against each other, keeping the interstitial spaces narrow and limiting the flow of cerebrospinal fluid through the tissue. Norepinephrine is, in effect, the chemical that keeps the museum open. That keeps the highway running. That keeps the buildings of the city pressed together and the streets narrow and the underground channels compressed. It is the signal that says the day is not over, that the world still requires your attention, that the cleaning crews must wait. And during delta sleep, norepinephrine levels plummet. They drop to their lowest point of the entire 24-hour cycle. The alertness signal is withdrawn. The chemical command to stay swollen and ready is lifted. And in the absence of this command, the brain cells complete their shrinkage. The contraction that began in lighter stages of sleep reaches its maximum. The interstitial space achieves its fullest expansion. The channels are as wide as they will ever be. The resistance to fluid flow is at its absolute minimum, and the delta waves, those great, slow, mechanical pulses, are now pumping cerebrospinal fluid through a landscape that offers almost no opposition. Wide channels, minimal resistance, maximum pump force. This is the confluence. This is the peak. This is the moment when every factor that contributes to glymphatic efficiency is aligned at its optimal level simultaneously, and the cleaning system operates at a power that no other state of consciousness can match. Think of a great subterranean river, one that flows through the deepest caverns of the earth, far below the reach of sunlight or sound. During the rainy season, the water rises, but the caves above are still partially filled with rock and sediment, and the river can only flow so fast, pushing against the obstacles in its path. But then, once in a rare alignment, the sediment shifts, the rocks settle, the caves open wide and clear, every obstruction removed, every passage unblocked, and the river, already swollen with the season's rain, surges forward with a power that reshapes the underground landscape. It scours the walls of the caverns. It reaches pools and chambers that have not been touched by moving water in months. It carries away deposits that had seemed permanent, unmovable, part of the stone itself. And when the surge has passed, the caverns are clean. Not just partially cleared, but thoroughly, completely, profoundly washed by a force that combined volume, velocity, and unobstructed passage into a single, irresistible event. This is what is happening inside your brain right now, in the deep hours. This is the midnight peak of purification. And every minute you spend in this state is a minute of cleaning at a level that nothing else in your biology can replicate or replace. Not caffeine, not meditation, not any drug or supplement or technology yet invented by human ingenuity. There is no substitute for delta sleep. There is no shortcut to the bottom of this ocean. The pump must beat. The chemistry must shift. The cells must shrink to their fullest extent. And the great, slow waves must roll, one after another, through the silent landscape of your mind. Each one driving the river forward. Each one carrying away another measure of the day's accumulated burden. And in this deepest place, something remarkable happens to your experience of time. If you could somehow be aware during delta sleep, which by definition you cannot, you would perceive time as having nearly stopped. The slow frequency of the waves, one every 2 seconds, creates a temporal landscape so stretched, so unhurried, so vast in its patience, that a single hour of delta sleep contains within it a kind of infinity, an infinity of cleaning, an infinity of restoration, an infinity of slow, powerful, rhythmic pulses, each one a small perfection, each one a complete cycle of compression and expansion, of push and pull, of the pump doing its ancient and essential work. You are at the bottom now, the deepest point of the night, the quietest, most powerful, most restorative state your biology can produce. And the river is at its fullest, its fastest, its most thorough. It is reaching every corner. It is flushing every channel. It is carrying away the last, most stubborn remnants of the day's metabolic burden. And as the toxins are lifted, as the beta amyloid is dissolved and the misfolded tau is swept away, and the interstitial fluid grows cleaner with each passing delta cycle, something else begins to happen. Something that goes beyond cleaning, beyond the simple removal of waste. The neurons themselves, those billions of cells that have been working so hard for you all day, and that have now been unburdened of the chemical weight that was pressing against them, they begin to change. Not just their size, which has already shifted. Not just their spacing, which has already expanded, but their internal architecture, their connections, the very structures that allow them to communicate with each other and with you, freed from the interference of metabolic debris, bathed in clean, fresh fluid, pulsed by the slow, deep rhythm of the delta waves, your neurons begin something even more extraordinary than cleaning. They begin to rebuild, to strengthen, to prepare themselves at the most fundamental structural level for the demands of the day that is coming. The purification is complete. The river has done its work. And now, in the clean, quiet, unburdened landscape it has left behind, the real restoration begins. The flood has passed. The river has done its work, and the waters have receded, leaving behind a landscape that is clean in a way it has not been since the previous night. The interstitial spaces of your brain, those microscopic channels between your neurons that were clogged with the metabolic debris of a full day of thinking and feeling and perceiving, are now clear. The beta amyloid has been carried away. The misfolded tau has been swept into the drainage pathways and exported from the skull. The oxidative fragments, the spent neurotransmitters, the cellular dust of a billion synaptic firings, all of it has been lifted and removed by the slow, powerful current that moved through your sleeping mind during the deepest hours of the night. And now, in this clean and quiet space, something new begins. Something that is not about removal, but about creation. Not about washing away, but about building up. The cleaning was essential. Without it, what comes next would be impossible. But the cleaning was only the preparation. It was the clearing of the stage before the performance, the tilling of the soil before the planting. What happens now, in the hours that follow the deepest flush, is where the true magic of sleep reveals itself. Your brain is about to rebuild. Begin with the smallest and most fundamental unit of biological power, the mitochondria. Inside every neuron in your brain, numbering in the hundreds or even thousands per cell, are these tiny, ancient organelles. They are the power plants of your cells. Each one is a microscopic engine that takes in glucose and oxygen and converts them into adenosine triphosphate, the molecule known simply as ATP, which is the universal energy currency of all living things. Every thought you think, every signal your neurons send, every ion that is pumped across a cell membrane to maintain the electrical potential that makes neural communication possible, all of it is powered by ATP. Without it, your brain would go dark in seconds, not minutes, seconds. The demand for ATP in your brain is so constant and so enormous that your neurons consume their entire supply and must regenerate it continuously, like a furnace that must be fed without interruption. During the day, this furnace burns hot. The mitochondria work at near maximum capacity, churning out ATP as fast as the neurons consume it, barely keeping pace with the relentless demand of waking consciousness. And this sustained, intense operation takes a toll on the mitochondria themselves. Their internal membranes, the delicate folded structures where the chemical reactions of energy production actually occur, accumulate damage. Their DNA, a small circular strand separate from the DNA in the cell's nucleus, is particularly vulnerable to the oxidative stress generated by their own activity. By the end of the day, many of your mitochondria are battered, less efficient, producing less ATP per unit of fuel consumed and generating more waste heat and more damaging free radicals as byproducts. The power plants are running, but they are running rough. And now, in the clean, unburdened environment of the post-flush brain, the process of mitochondrial biogenesis begins. This is the creation of new mitochondria, not the repair of old ones, though that happens too, but the actual generation of fresh, pristine power plants to replace or supplement those that have been worn down by the day's demands. The signals for this process are complex, involving a cascade of genetic switches and molecular messengers, but the outcome is straightforward. New mitochondria are assembled inside your neurons, each one a perfect, undamaged engine with clean membranes, intact DNA, and full capacity for energy production. By morning, the number of functional mitochondria in your brain cells will have increased. The total energy-producing capacity of your neural network will have been restored and, in some cases, enhanced beyond its previous baseline. Your inner battery is being recharged, not in the vague metaphorical sense of simply resting, but in the literal, physical, measurable sense of increasing the number and quality of the molecular machines that produce the energy your brain needs to function. And alongside this energy renewal, the ATP that has been depleted throughout the day is being replenished. During the reduced metabolic demand of deep sleep, when the neurons are no longer firing at their frantic waking pace, the mitochondria can finally produce ATP faster than it is being consumed. The reserves build, the cellular energy stores fill, like a reservoir that has been drawn down to dangerously low levels during a long, dry summer and is now being refilled by steady, soaking autumn rains. The ATP levels in your neurons rise through the night, restoring the electrical potential, the chemical readiness, the raw biological power that your brain will need to meet the demands of the coming day. But the restoration goes far deeper than energy. Your neurons are also repairing their physical infrastructure, and one of the most critical structures being restored right now is the myelin sheath. Myelin is a fatty, insulating layer that wraps around the long, thin axons of your neurons, the cables through which electrical signals travel from one cell to the next. It functions exactly like the insulation around an electrical wire. Without it, the signal leaks. It dissipates. It slows. A well-myelinated axon can transmit a signal at speeds exceeding 100 meters per second. A poorly myelinated one transmits the same signal at a fraction of that speed, with less precision, less reliability, and more energy wasted along the way. The difference between a sharp, quick, clear-thinking brain and a foggy, sluggish, slow-to-respond brain is, to a significant degree, the difference between well-maintained myelin and degraded myelin. During the day, the constant firing of your neurons places stress on these myelin sheaths. The electrical activity generates heat. The metabolic byproducts that accumulate in the interstitial space can be mildly corrosive to the fatty membranes. And the sheer volume of signal traffic wears on the insulation the way heavy use wears on any material, no matter how well constructed. By evening, the myelin around your most active neural pathways has thinned slightly, developed microscopic imperfections, lost a fraction of its insulating efficiency. You do not notice this consciously, but your brain notices. Your reaction times are a few milliseconds slower. Your word recall is slightly less fluid. The connections between ideas that were effortless at 10 in the morning require more effort by 10 at night. This is not imagination. This is myelin. And now, in the clean, quiet, toxin-free environment of your sleeping brain, the oligodendrocytes are at work. These are the specialized glial cells whose sole purpose is to produce and maintain myelin. During waking hours, they are inhibited by the same chemical signals that keep the brain in its alert, outward-facing mode. But during sleep, and particularly during the deep, restorative phases that follow the glymphatic flush, the oligodendrocytes become intensely active. They extend their processes along the axons of your neurons, wrapping fresh layers of myelin around segments that have thinned, repairing the microscopic gaps and imperfections that accumulated during the day, restoring the insulation to its full thickness and integrity. By morning, the cables of your neural network will be freshly wrapped, their signals traveling faster and cleaner than they did 12 hours ago. And then there is BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If mitochondrial biogenesis is the recharging of your battery and myelin repair is the rewiring of your cables, then BDNF is the fertilizer for your garden. It is a protein produced by neurons themselves, and it is one of the most important molecules in the entire story of brain health and cognitive vitality. BDNF promotes the survival of existing neurons, protecting them from the kinds of stress and damage that might otherwise lead to cell death. It stimulates the growth of new dendrites, the branching, tree-like extensions of neurons that receive signals from other cells, effectively increasing the surface area available for communication and allowing each neuron to participate in a greater number of circuits. It strengthens synapses, the junctions between neurons where signals are transmitted, making them more efficient, more reliable, more capable of the rapid, precise signaling that underlies everything from quick reflexes to creative insight. And perhaps most remarkably, BDNF supports neurogenesis, the birth of entirely new neurons in specific regions of the brain, particularly the hippocampus, the structure most critical for learning and memory formation. During deep sleep, BDNF levels rise. The gene that codes for this protein is upregulated during the restorative phases of the sleep cycle, and the protein itself is released in quantities that exceed daytime levels. It bathes the newly cleaned neural landscape like rain falling on freshly tilled earth. And just as rain on prepared soil triggers the germination of seeds that have been lying dormant, BDNF on cleaned neurons triggers a cascade of growth and strengthening processes that would be impossible in the cluttered, toxin-laden environment of the unsleeping brain. The waste had to be cleared first. The soil had to be cleaned. And now that it has been, the fertilizer can do its work. Picture a garden after a heavy, soaking rain. The kind of rain that falls all night, steady and warm, saturating the earth, filling every root channel, dissolving every pocket of dry, compacted soil. By morning, the rain has stopped, and the garden is transformed. The soil is dark and moist and rich. The air smells of earth and green and possibility. And everywhere you look, there are signs of new growth. Tiny, pale shoots pushing up through the wet ground, unfurling their first leaves toward the light. Established plants standing straighter, their stems thicker, their colors deeper, nourished by the water that reached their deepest roots during the night. The garden did not create this growth through effort or will. It simply received the rain. It simply allowed the water to do what water does when it meets prepared and waiting soil. Your brain is this garden. The rain has fallen. The BDNF is flowing. And in every region of your sleeping mind, growth is quietly, steadily underway. New dendritic branches are extending from neurons in your hippocampus, each one a potential new connection, a new pathway for information to travel, a new thread in the vast web of associations that constitutes your understanding of the world. Existing synapses are being strengthened, their molecular machinery reinforced, their receptor proteins replenished, their capacity for signal transmission restored and enhanced. The connections that you used most during the day, the pathways that carried the most important information, the circuits that fired with the most intensity and frequency, these are being preferentially reinforced, consolidated, made more permanent, while weaker, less used connections are being gently pruned, their resources redirected to the pathways that matter most. This is not random. This is curation. This is your brain, in its deepest wisdom, deciding what to keep and what to release, what to strengthen and what to let fade, sculpting itself in the silence of the night into a more refined, more efficient, more capable instrument than it was when you fell asleep. Imagine an ancient library. For years, the books have gathered dust, the leather bindings have cracked, the gilt lettering on the spines has faded, the shelves themselves have warped under the weight of neglect. But now the library has been cleaned, the dust has been swept away, the air is fresh, and into this renewed space come the artisans, bookbinders with skilled hands and fine materials. They take down each volume, one by one, and examine it with care. The most important texts, the ones that are consulted most often, the ones that contain the most essential knowledge, these are rebound in the finest leather, their spines reinforced, their pages repaired, their gilt lettering restored until it gleams under the lamplight. Lesser volumes are maintained, but placed on higher shelves, still accessible, but given less priority. And in the empty spaces where damaged books have been removed, new volumes appear, freshly written, freshly bound, containing knowledge that did not exist in the library until this very night. The library is not merely clean, it is richer than it was before, more organized, more beautiful, more ready to serve the scholars who will return in the morning. This is what is happening to your neural network right now. This is the dawn of inner vitality, not the dramatic, visible dawn of the world outside, but the quiet, internal dawn that happens in the cells of your brain while the sky is still dark. Your intelligence is being physically rebuilt. Your creativity is being structurally reinforced. Your emotional resilience, your capacity for patience and empathy and joy, all of these are rooted in the health and connectivity of specific neural circuits, and those circuits are being repaired, strengthened, and expanded at this very moment by the molecular tools that deep sleep has unleashed. The inner battery is full now. The mitochondria are fresh and numerous, ready to produce the torrents of ATP that your waking brain will demand. The myelin is restored, smooth and thick around every major pathway, ready to carry signals at full speed. The BDNF has done its work, and the garden of your mind is green and dense with new growth, ready to absorb the sunlight of the coming day. And somewhere, in the deepest part of this restoration, something begins to shift. The delta waves that have been rolling through your cortex for hours are beginning to change. Their frequency is increasing, almost imperceptibly. The great, slow swells gradually giving way to slightly faster, slightly lighter rhythms. The subterranean engine is slowing its rotation. The midnight river is beginning to recede, not because the work is unfinished, but because it is complete. The cleaning is done. The rebuilding is done. The preparation is done. And now, like the first thin line of light that appears on the eastern horizon long before the sun itself is visible, something is stirring in the upper layers of your consciousness. A warmth, a brightening, the faintest flicker of awareness returning to a mind that has spent hours in the deepest, most productive darkness it is capable of entering. You are not awake yet, not even close, but the machinery of waking is beginning to assemble itself, quietly, in the wings, preparing for the moment when the restored, recharged, rebuilt brain will open its eyes and meet the morning with a clarity and a power that only this night's work could have produced. The dawn is coming. Not the dawn of the sky, the dawn of you. There is a moment, just before you open your eyes, when the brain completes its final act of preparation. You are not yet awake. The world has not yet rushed in with its noise and its demands and its relentless stream of information. But somewhere deep inside your skull, the last switches are being flipped. The last systems are coming online. The last calibrations are being made. And then, in a single, seamless transition that you will never consciously perceive, the gates open. The thalamus, that great relay station at the center of your brain that spent the night with its doors closed, blocking the external world from reaching your cortex, begins to unlock its channels one by one. Sensory information starts to flow again. Light through your eyelids, sound from the room around you, the weight of the blanket on your skin, the temperature of the air, all of it streaming inward through pathways that have been silent for hours and are now, for the first time since yesterday, fully open and fully operational. And the brain that receives this information is not the same brain that closed those gates last night. It is cleaner, it is faster, it is more sensitive, more precise, more capable of processing the flood of data that waking life demands. Every surface has been washed, every channel has been flushed, every receptor has been restored. The organ that is now taking its first conscious breath of the new day has been through a transformation so thorough and so profound that it is, in every meaningful biological sense, a renewed instrument. And you can feel it even before you have a word for it, even before your first conscious thought has fully formed. You can feel the difference. There is a lightness, a clarity, a sharpness to your perception that was absent 12 hours ago. The world seems slightly more vivid, slightly more defined, as though someone has taken the lens through which you view reality and polished it while you slept. This is not poetry. This is neuroscience. And it begins with a molecule called adenosine. You remember adenosine. It was mentioned earlier as one of the waste products that accumulates during waking hours, building up in the interstitial spaces of your brain with every hour you spend awake. Adenosine is a neuromodulator, a chemical that influences the behavior of neurons without directly triggering them to fire, and its influence is specifically inhibitory. It binds to receptors on the surface of your neurons, and when it does, it reduces their excitability. It makes them less responsive, less likely to fire, less capable of the rapid, energetic signaling that underlies alert, focused, high-level cognition. This is, in fact, the primary mechanism by which your brain generates the sensation of sleepiness. The longer you are awake, the more adenosine accumulates, and the more your neural activity is suppressed by its presence. By late evening, after 16 or more hours of wakefulness, The adenosine concentration in your brain is so high that your neurons are effectively operating through a chemical fog, firing more slowly, responding less sharply, struggling against a tide of inhibition that only sleep can reverse. And now sleep has reversed it. During the hours of glymphatic flow, the accumulated adenosine was swept away, along with the beta amyloid and the tau and all the other metabolic debris. The receptors that were saturated with adenosine are now clear, free, unoccupied. And in this unoccupied state, they are exquisitely sensitive. The neurotransmitters that drive alertness and focus and cognitive performance, dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, these molecules now find receptors that are clean and ready, freshly restored, capable of responding to even the smallest signal with full force and full fidelity. It is the difference between speaking into a telephone with a clear line and speaking into one clogged with static. The message is the same, but the clarity of its reception is transformed. And this restoration of receptor sensitivity has immediate, measurable consequences for every aspect of your cognitive function. Your processing speed, the raw velocity at which your brain can take in information, analyze it, and produce a response, is demonstrably faster after a full night of restorative sleep than it was at any point during the previous evening. The neural signals travel along freshly myelinated axons. They cross synapses that have been strengthened and restocked with neurotransmitter vesicles during the night. They arrive at receptors that are clean and responsive. Every link in the chain of information processing has been serviced, and the result is a brain that operates with a fluidity and a speed that the evening brain simply could not match. Think of a camera lens, a fine, precision-ground lens, capable of capturing images of extraordinary sharpness and detail. But over the course of a long day of use, a thin film has accumulated on its surface. Fingerprints, dust, the faintest haze of moisture from the air. Each imperfection is individually invisible, too small to see with the naked eye. But together, they create a softness, a blurring. The images that the lens produces are still recognizable, still functional, but they have lost their edge. The fine details that should be crisp and distinct are slightly smeared. The colors that should be vivid are slightly muted. And then, carefully, thoroughly, the lens is cleaned. Every trace of residue is wiped away. Every surface is polished to its original clarity. And the next image that passes through this lens is transformed, sharp, vivid, every detail rendered with a precision that takes your breath away. Nothing has changed about the lens itself. It is the same glass, the same curvature, the same optical engineering. But the removal of what did not belong has revealed what was always there. Your prefrontal cortex wakes up this morning like a freshly cleaned lens, and the prefrontal cortex is, in many ways, the crown jewel of your neural architecture. It is the most recently evolved region of the human brain, the structure that sits behind your forehead and that is most responsible for the cognitive abilities that make you distinctly human. Complex decision-making, abstract reasoning, planning for the future, weighing competing priorities, suppressing impulsive reactions, sustaining attention on a chosen task despite distractions, creative problem-solving that requires the integration of information from multiple, disparate sources. All of these capacities are primarily orchestrated by the prefrontal cortex, and all of them are exquisitely sensitive to the chemical environment in which this brain region operates. The prefrontal cortex is, in fact, the region most immediately and most severely impaired by sleep deprivation, and it is the region that benefits most dramatically from a full night of restorative sleep. When the metabolic waste has been cleared, and the receptors have been restored, and the synaptic connections have been strengthened, the prefrontal cortex comes online in the morning, operating at a level that is qualitatively different from where it was the night before. The decisions you make in the first hours of the day, after a night of deep, effective sleep, are measurably better than the decisions you were making at midnight. Not because you were trying harder, not because the stakes are different, but because the physical machinery that produces good decisions has been serviced, cleaned, and optimized overnight. This is why your best ideas come in the morning. This is the secret behind the experience that nearly every creative person in history has described. That flash of insight, that sudden solution to a problem that seemed intractable the night before, that moment of seeing clearly what was obscured just hours ago. It is not luck. It is not mystical inspiration descending from some external source. It is biology. It is the direct, predictable, reproducible result of a brain that has been through the full cycle of glymphatic cleansing, cellular restoration, and synaptic optimization. The morning mind is operating on a clean slate. The thalamus is routing information with precision. The cortex is processing it with speed. The prefrontal regions are evaluating it with clarity. And the connections between these structures, the vast network of pathways that integrates perception with memory, with emotion, with reasoning, these connections are functioning at their peak because they have been physically repaired and reinforced during the night. Imagine a high-definition screen, the kind of screen capable of displaying millions of colors with perfect accuracy. Every pixel sharp and distinct, every gradient smooth, every detail rendered with a fidelity that makes the image seem more real than reality itself. But over time, a layer of fine dust has settled on the surface, not enough to obscure the image entirely. You can still see what is being displayed, but the vibrancy is diminished. The contrast is reduced. The blacks are not quite black, and the whites are not quite white, and the colors in between have lost their saturation. And then the screen is wiped clean. One careful, thorough pass, and every particle of dust is removed. The screen comes alive, the colors explode, the contrast deepens. The image that was merely visible is now stunning, arresting, impossible to look away from. The technology did not change. The capability was always there, but the clarity was buried under an accumulation that only cleaning could remove. This is your conscious experience this morning. This is the reward of the nightly wash. The world has not changed overnight. The same challenges await you. The same relationships, the same responsibilities, the same uncertainties. But the instrument through which you perceive and navigate these realities has been transformed. Your emotional responses are more stable this morning because the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, is no longer operating in the hyperreactive state that sleep deprivation and toxin accumulation produce. Your memory is sharper because the hippocampus has had its connections strengthened and its waste burden lifted. Your capacity for empathy is restored because the neural circuits that allow you to model the mental states of others, circuits that require significant prefrontal resources to operate, are fully powered and fully online. You are, in this moment, the best version of yourself that biology can produce, not because you have achieved something extraordinary, not because you have trained or practiced or earned this state through effort, but because you allowed it to happen. Because you gave your brain the one thing it needed to perform its nightly miracle. Time. Uninterrupted, deep, sufficient time in the darkness. Time for the cells to shrink, for the fluid to flow, for the waves to pump, for the toxins to be flushed, for the mitochondria to regenerate, for the myelin to be restored, for the BDNF to nourish, for the synapses to be strengthened, for the entire magnificent system to complete its cycle from beginning to end without interruption. This is the morning brilliance, and it is not a coincidence. It is not a gift of temperament or genetics or circumstance. It is a biological reward. It is the direct, proportional return on the investment of deep sleep. The more consistently you achieve full cycles of slow-wave sleep, the more thoroughly the glymphatic system completes its flush, the more completely the restoration processes run to their conclusion, the sharper and more vital and more resilient your morning brain will be. It is as predictable as the relationship between exercise and muscle strength, between nutrition and physical health, between sunlight and the growth of a plant. The input produces the output. The investment yields the return. Deep sleep produces morning clarity with the reliability of a natural law. And here is what should give you pause. What should make you reconsider every late night, every hour of sleep sacrificed to screens or work or worry. This morning clarity, this cognitive brilliance, this emotional resilience and perceptual sharpness, it is not merely a pleasant bonus. It is not simply a nice way to start the day. It is the visible, experiential surface of a process that has implications far beyond a single morning. Because the toxins that are cleared each night, the beta-amyloid and the tau and the oxidative debris, these are not merely the causes of daily fog and fatigue. In their accumulated, unchecked form, over months and years and decades of insufficient sleep, they are the building blocks of something far more consequential, far more permanent, far more devastating than a bad morning or a sluggish afternoon. The same proteins that the glymphatic system washes away each night are the proteins that, when they are not washed away, when they are allowed to accumulate night after night in a brain that never reaches the depth of sleep needed to fully clear them, slowly, inexorably, irreversibly aggregate into the plaques and tangles that define the most feared neurodegenerative disease of our time. The nightly wash is not just about tomorrow, it is about all your tomorrows. Every night of deep sleep is a deposit in an account that pays interest over the span of a lifetime. Every night of insufficient sleep is a withdrawal from that same account, a small but cumulative deficit that compounds in the darkness, invisible and silent, until the day the balance is due. The clarity you feel this morning is a gift, but it is also a preview, a small, daily demonstration of what your brain can be when it is properly maintained. And it is an invitation to consider what it means to maintain that brain, not just for today, not just for this week, but for the decades that stretch ahead of you. Decades in which the choices you make about sleep will echo in the health of every neuron, every synapse, every thought you will ever think. The morning is bright, your mind is clear, and somewhere in the distance, the longer story is waiting to be told. Everything you have heard tonight, every mechanism, every molecule, every wave, and current and cellular transformation has been the story of a single night, one cycle, one passage from wakefulness through the depths of sleep and back toward the approaching dawn. But now, In this final chapter, the lens must widen. The frame must expand beyond tonight, beyond tomorrow morning, beyond the week and the month and the year. Because the true significance of what your brain does while you sleep is not measured in hours. It is measured in decades. It is measured in the accumulated effect of thousands upon thousands of these nightly cycles, each one a small act of maintenance, each one a quiet defense against the most relentless enemy your brain will ever face. Time. You are aging. From the moment you were born, the clock began. And your brain, magnificent as it is not exempt from the passage of years. The neurons you carry today are, many of them, the same neurons you have carried since childhood. Unlike the cells of your skin or your blood or the lining of your gut, which are constantly being replaced by fresh generations, most of your neurons are with you for life. They do not divide. They do not replicate. They are not replaced when they are damaged or lost. The brain you are using to process these words right now is, in a very real sense, an original, an irreplaceable original. And like any irreplaceable thing, its longevity depends entirely on how well it is maintained. This is where the story of the glymphatic system becomes not just fascinating but urgent, not just beautiful but essential, because the waste products that are cleared during sleep, the beta amyloid and the tau that are flushed from your interstitial spaces every night, are not merely the causes of daily cognitive fog. They are the molecular precursors of Alzheimer's disease. This is not speculation. This is not a tentative hypothesis at the margins of neuroscience. This is one of the most robust and well-documented findings in the modern study of neurodegeneration. The plaques that characterize Alzheimer's disease are composed primarily of aggregated beta amyloid. The tangles that destroy neurons from within are composed of hyperphosphorylated, misfolded tau. These are the same molecules, the same proteins, the same substances that your glymphatic system targets and removes every single night that you achieve sufficient deep sleep. The difference between a brain that develops Alzheimer's disease and one that does not is, to a significant and increasingly well understood degree, a difference in the cumulative efficiency of this nightly clearance over the span of a lifetime. When the system works well, when deep sleep is consistently achieved, when the delta waves pump and the cells shrink and the cerebrospinal fluid floods the interstitial spaces with sufficient force and duration, the beta amyloid and the tau are cleared before they can aggregate. They are swept away as individual molecules, dissolved in the flowing current, carried out through the lymphatic drainage, and eliminated from the body. The concentration never reaches the threshold at which these proteins begin to find each other and stick together. The plaques never form. The tangles never develop. The neurons remain clean, functional, and intact. But when sleep is chronically insufficient, when the deep stages are cut short by late nights or disrupted by stress or fragmented by the insidious glow of screens in the hours before bed, the clearance is incomplete. Not all of the beta amyloid is removed. Not all of the tau is flushed away. A small residue remains, lingering in the interstitial spaces. And when the next day's waste is added on top of it, and the next night's clearance is again incomplete, that residue grows, slowly, invisibly, without any symptom or any sign. Night after night, year after year, the uncollected molecules begin to find each other. They form small clusters. The clusters grow into larger aggregations. The aggregations become plaques. And the plaques, once formed, are extraordinarily difficult for the body to remove. They become permanent features of the neural landscape, sitting on the surfaces of neurons, interfering with synaptic transmission, triggering inflammatory responses, and eventually causing the death of the very cells they are attached to. This is the slow catastrophe of insufficient sleep. It does not announce itself. It does not produce dramatic symptoms in its early stages. A person can go years, even decades, accumulating these microscopic deposits without any awareness that anything is wrong. And by the time the first clinical symptoms of cognitive decline appear, by the time the forgetfulness and the confusion and the personality changes become noticeable to the person and to those around them, the damage is extensive. The plaques and tangles have spread through critical brain regions. Neurons have been lost in quantities that cannot be recovered. The disease, which began as nothing more than a series of incomplete nights, has become irreversible. But it did not have to be this way. And this is the message that matters more than any other in this entire journey tonight. Imagine a lighthouse, an ancient, beautiful lighthouse, standing on a rocky promontory above a dark and restless sea. Its light is powerful, a brilliant beam that cuts through fog and storm and darkness, guiding ships safely past the rocks, saving lives that would otherwise be lost to the waves. But the light can only shine if the glass is clean. The great lens that focuses and amplifies the beam must be free of salt spray and soot and the accumulated grime that the ocean air deposits night after night. And so, every evening, before the light is lit, the keeper climbs the tower. With careful hands and soft cloths, they polish every surface of the lens, removing every trace of residue, restoring the glass to its original, perfect clarity. And the light shines, night after night, year after year, decade after decade. The light shines with undiminished power because the glass is never allowed to cloud. The keeper does not polish the lens because it is broken. They polish it because it must never be allowed to break. The maintenance is not a response to damage. It is the prevention of damage. And the lighthouse stands for 100 years. Its beam as strong on the last night as it was on the first, because someone understood that the cost of nightly care is infinitely less than the cost of letting the glass go dark. You are the keeper of your own lighthouse, and deep sleep is your nightly climb to the top of the tower. This is the concept that neuroscientists call cognitive reserve. It is the idea that a brain which has been consistently well maintained, which has been allowed to complete its full cycle of cleaning and restoration night after night across the span of a lifetime, develops a resilience that goes beyond the simple absence of disease. It builds a buffer, a margin of safety, a reserve of neural connectivity and synaptic strength and structural integrity that allows it to absorb the inevitable insults of aging, the minor strokes, the small injuries, the gradual loss of neurons that comes with advanced age, without crossing the threshold into cognitive impairment. Two brains can carry identical amounts of age-related damage, and one will show symptoms of decline, while the other continues to function with clarity and competence. The difference, increasingly, is understood to be the maintenance history. The brain that was cleaned every night has more reserve, more connections, more redundancy, more pathways through which information can be routed when the primary pathway is compromised. It is not immune to aging. Nothing is immune to aging, but it is resilient. It bends where a less maintained brain would break. And this resilience is built one night at a time, one cycle at a time, one deep, slow, delta-driven flush at a time. There is no way to bank sleep. You cannot deprive yourself for years and then make up for it with a month of rest. The maintenance must be consistent. The glass must be polished every night. The river must flow every night. The pump must beat its slow, ancient rhythm every night. Because the waste is produced every day, and if it is not cleared that same night, it begins to accumulate in ways that are difficult and eventually impossible to reverse. Think of an eternal spring, a source of pure, clear water rising from deep within the earth, feeding a garden that surrounds it. The garden is old, impossibly old. It has seen countless seasons turn. The winters come and the leaves fall, and the frost covers the ground in white silence, but the spring never freezes. The water keeps rising, warm and clean, flowing through the roots of the garden, even in the coldest months, carrying nutrients, washing away the acidic residue of decaying leaves, keeping the soil alive and fertile beneath the snow. And when spring arrives, the garden blooms again, not in spite of winter, but because of the constant, faithful, invisible care that the water provided through the dark months. The garden endures not because it is immune to the seasons, but because it is sustained by a source that never stops. Your glymphatic system is this spring, and every night of deep sleep is another season of its faithful, sustaining flow. Now consider the gift you are giving to yourself, not the self that will wake tomorrow morning, though that self will indeed reap the immediate rewards of tonight's cleaning, but the self that will exist in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30. That future self, the person you have not yet become, is depending on the choices you make tonight. Every hour of deep sleep you achieve is a deposit into an account that this future self will draw upon. Every full cycle of glymphatic flow is a layer of protection laid down against the diseases that would steal your memory, your identity, your ability to recognize the faces of the people you love. You cannot see this future self. You cannot feel their gratitude, but they are there, waiting at the far end of the timeline of your life, and the quality of their existence, the clarity of their mind, the preservation of everything that makes them recognizably you, is being determined, in part, by what you do in the next 8 hours. Sleep is not lost time. This is perhaps the most important sentence in this entire journey. Sleep is not lost time. It is not a gap in your productivity. It is not a concession to weakness. It is not an interruption of your life. It is the maintenance of your life. It is the single most powerful act of self-preservation available to any human being, requiring no technology, no medication, no special equipment, no expense. It is free. It is natural. It is built into the deepest architecture of your biology. And it is, when measured across the full span of a life, the most potent anti-aging force that nature has ever created, more powerful than any supplement, more effective than any drug, more consequential than any single health decision you will ever make. Sleep is the guardian of your future mind, and tonight you have honored that guardian. You have given it what it asked for. You have surrendered to the dark. You have allowed the cells to shrink, the fluid to flow, the waves to pump, the toxins to be carried away. You have let the mitochondria regenerate and the myelin restore, and the BDNF rain down upon the garden of your neurons. You have done the one thing that your brain cannot do for itself. You have stopped. You have been still. You have let go. And now, as this final chapter draws to its close, as the words grow softer and the spaces between them grow longer, feel the weight of what you have accomplished simply by lying here. Feel the lightness of a mind that has been cleaned. Feel the strength of a brain that has been rebuilt. Feel the quiet, steady confidence of knowing that what you have done tonight, you will do again tomorrow night, and the night after that, and the night after that, each cycle a small act of devotion to the person you are becoming. The lighthouse stands, the glass is clean, the light is shining, steady and bright, out across the dark water, and it will shine again tomorrow night, and the night after, and for all the nights that follow, for as long as you choose to climb the tower and care for the lens that protects your most precious light. Let the breath slow now. Let the body settle deeper into its resting place. Feel how the rhythm of your breathing mirrors something much larger than yourself. The tide that rises and falls along every shore on Earth. The rotation of the planet, turning its face away from the sun and then back again. The expansion and contraction of the universe itself, breathing in and breathing out across spans of time, too vast for any mind to hold. You are part of this rhythm. You have always been part of it. Every night you close your eyes and sleep, you join the oldest cycle in existence, the cycle of renewal, the cycle of return, the letting go of what has been so that what will be can arrive, clean and new and full of silent potential. The breath rises, the breath falls, the river flows, and you are safe, and you are whole, and you are held by the same ancient current that has carried every sleeping mind since the first night fell upon the first dreaming creature that ever lived. Rest now, the cycle is complete, and when the morning comes, you will begin again, bright and clear, washed by the river that never forgets to come for you, carried by the tide that never fails to rise. Rest now.